We are going to try and give some time today for some questions. So I am in charge of the technology, so we are probably doomed on that front. So I'm going to share the slides and we're going to get going. And just a quick introduction from myself and Julian before we get going. I'm Mags Bradbury, and I am Head of Social Responsibility and Civic Engagement. We've got here as well Dr. Julian Skirm, who is going to be the chair for the session. We've got a really amazing lineup, really kind of different speakers from different aspects of Civic. So we've got Professor John Holden, who's our Vice President for Civic Engagement and Innovation. He's going to talk about all things innovation, all the things that we've been kind of seeing develop over the last few years. So it's great to have him here. We've got John McAuliffe, who many of you will know from Creative Manchester, but he's now the Associate Vice President for Culture and going to talk about culture and civic engagement. And we're really grateful for our external speaker today, Sophie Morby, who's the senior organiser from Greater Manchester Citizens. And I work personally really closely with Sophie, and she is a credible partner to work with. And we're very lucky to be part of Citizens. So, Julian, am I okay to hand over to you to talk about how civic engagement fits strategically within what we do?
Brilliant. Thanks, Mags. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon, just about. Thanks for joining us. You should all have seen this in different formats, but just to say, first of all, that Civic is actually in the strapline for the whole university. And John will talk about this, John Holden, in a moment. But we want to be a great civic university for the 21st century and redefine what that means. And so Civic sits across all of our foundations, pretty much most of our leaps as well, and is infused in the different outcomes we want to achieve. But if you look at our foundations, being of Manchester and for the world, being of Manchester, the clues in the title of the university, of course, the University of Manchester. But also being values-led and socially responsible. We want our research and teaching to make a contribution locally. When we're organised for success as a university, that has benefits to our regional economy and society, and a place where you matter. Lots of our staff, for example, 80% of our staff actually live in Greater Manchester. So what we do and how we treat our own staff matters from a civic perspective. We've got a range of leaps, and then we have various outcomes as well that we want to achieve as a university. So Civic sits across and is embedded. Think of it as this kind of horizontal foundation that sits across the entire strategy for the university. So next slide, please, Max. Just to say, we've got a framework for social responsibility and civic engagement that looks at some pillars and priorities. The pillars are being how we do our work, and the priorities being what we do, if you like. And just to say, in those pillars, we can contribute to civic engagement through our research. That's the first part on the right there. Through our teaching, learning and students. That's the second part on the right. Through our practices, how our engagement practices, and John McAuliffe in particular will talk a lot about the practices of our cultural institutions here, and also our operations as well, who we employ, how we spend our money, what's our role as a landowner. So that's that fourth pillar about our engaged operations. So that's kind of the how civic engagement happens. In terms of the what, we've got a whole range of strengths, and you're going to hear about some of them today, but we've got strengths and priorities around social inclusion, around prosperity, and John Holden in particular will talk a lot about that in a moment, better health, cultural and digital engagement. So you'll hear a lot about cultural engagement from John McAuliffe, and environmental sustainability as well. And I think when Sophie speaks from GM Citizens, there's a focus on many of those priorities, particularly around social cohesion and inclusion, and our partners in that are really, really key. Next slide, please, Max. And the last thing I wanted to say is just, what does civic mean? You know, there is one aspect of civic, which is to be civic minded, and we might think of that as a verb and something that could apply, whether that's locally or globally in our work. But generally, when we talk about civic, we're meaning something that's place-based. That's how most people understand it. It refers to place, and our principal place. It's not the only local area that we serve. So, for example, John will say later that Jodrell Bank is outside of Greater Manchester, but really, when we talk about civic, in most cases, we're meaning our principal relationships within Greater Manchester, where our campus and where the Oxford Road corridor, where the City of Manchester is based. But of course, our impact goes way beyond this. And if I take Jodrell Bank, it's not only just outside Greater Manchester, it also listens into outer space. So from a spatial perspective, you couldn't get bigger than what Jodrell Bank is doing through its research. So I think that's everything for me. I'm really pleased now to hand over to our three speakers. So John's going to speak for 6 or so minutes on civic engagement and innovation. And he's the first of three speakers. So John Holden, thanks ever so much for giving up your time today. I'll pass over to you now to be our first speaker on civic engagement and innovation. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Julian. That's a great introduction. I've been given strict instructions to stick to 6 minutes, and what I want to do is focus on three things. Firstly, to give a quick overview of our strategic approach to innovation and how Civic is wrapped into that. Secondly, to talk through some of the structures we've got in place and partnerships we've got in place to allow us to deliver on our strategic ambition. And finally, to talk about, I think, what are two of our really exciting projects, Sister and our involvement in Atom Valley, which are really sort of exemplify how we drive civic innovation through civic engagement through innovation. One thing I should say is that we'll talk about far less than we're actually doing. So there's a huge amount we're doing. So this is very much a small snapshot on all the activity, but hopefully gives you a flavour of our activity. So firstly then to look at the strategy, and Julian's expressed this really well. Civic cuts through the whole of the strategy. It's woven throughout. On the innovation agenda, we've taken a very specific decision to put our role in the region absolutely at the heart of what we're doing. So the Innovation Leap doesn't talk about just the university doing innovation for the benefit of ourselves. It's actually working in partnership to drive innovation in our whole of our ecosystem. And that's really important because that's a thing we do as a civic institution because that's the public good. But we actually also really benefit from that as an institution. And we know the world's best universities for research and teaching are embedded in really high-performing innovation ecosystems. And that is at the heart of what we are looking to deliver. As Julian says, as an institution ourselves, we have a huge impact on our economy already just by the nature of what we do. So the 47,000 students, 13,000 staff, people will know the figures. As an employer, we're one of Manchester's largest employers, largest institutions. Our turnover is higher than that of Manchester City and Manchester United combined. We employ about 1 in 50 people in Greater Manchester and supply a huge amount of talented people. So that sort of business as usual impact of the university is massive. We've got a set of institutions within the university that help us deliver that impact. On the right-hand side, we've got our business engagement function that supports hundreds of collaborations with businesses across Greater Manchester and beyond. Our innovation factory works to create spin-out companies. Most of those land in Manchester as their first starting point, and many of them go on to scale in the region. We want more of them to stay here. And the Masood Entrepreneurship Centre delivers student entrepreneurship training. And many of those students go on to create those businesses in Manchester as well. What we've done recently as part of the strategy development implementation process is create a new organisation called Unit M that's got a very specific regional role. So it's a very outward-facing unit within the organisation. Its mission is to unlock all of our innovation potential as the region's largest innovation asset to drive growth and prosperity for our region. It does that through a whole host of ways, through creating new place-based partnerships, which I'll talk more about around Sister and Atom Valley, around creating the innovation ecosystem that allows more of our partner companies, spin-outs and startups to scale, working hand in glove with our partners at the Combined Authority and City Council on a whole range of initiatives. And we're just completing a large piece of work looking at the future of technical education in the system in the region and the university's role working in collaboration with its partners. So yeah, that's a really exciting development. You'll hear more about that over the coming weeks and months. Move on to the next slide. Important to say, I mean, as a university, we are not arrogant enough to think that we can do everything ourselves, and we have to work in partnership. And we've got many great partnerships with our region. We're part of the UK's largest civic universities agreement, so that's bringing together all 5 universities in the city region with the local authorities and combined authorities to work on a broad agenda covering skills, culture, health, and the economy and beyond. We established about 3 years ago now a new triple helix organisation called Innovation Greater Manchester. That's very much focused on driving growth in industry clusters. And we also connect Manchester into the rest of the UK and the world. And the recently announced Cambridge-Manchester Partnership is an example of that. Conscious that my time is running out, so I just want to say a few words around our work on Greater Manchester's industrial strategy zone. So if we get the next slide. This is taken from the prospectus for the industrial strategy zone. It's a little bit out of date because it still refers to sister as ID Manchester, but what this shows is the centrality of the university in the region's future growth agenda. So we're playing a key role through the redevelopment of our North Campus into sister. That will be a new innovation district, which will eventually have around 10,000 jobs on site. Last September, we opened up the Reynolds building as a new co-working centre. That's got about 90 of our staff and students in there, creating businesses, driving jobs and growth for the region. We've also got a critical role in the Aton Valley initiative. In fact, I'm driving off to Oldham for a meeting straight after this, supporting manufacturing scale-up activity, building on our R&D strengths in materials and manufacturing. So what we're seeing here is really the university starting to have that city level impact, whereas over the next sort of 2 decades we'll be at the heart of catalysing around 30,000 jobs for our region. So I've come to the end of my time. I'm going to stop there. As I say, we're just getting started with our civic and innovation agenda. So yeah, delighted to have this conversation. If colleagues want to reach out to talk to me more, very happy to meet and speak to people.
Thanks, John Holden. That's excellent timing as well. Just to say that if you did have any questions, you can do 2 things. You can first put them in the chat, and John, if you tag John in the chat, he's happy to answer there. But also, if you've got any questions, save them until the end, because there will be some Q&A at the end as well. So if there's something that John Holden has just said you wanted to ask about, please just save that up or put it in the chat. Thanks very much, John Holden. So now over to the next John, Professor John McAuliffe, who's our Associate Vice President for the Cultural Portfolio. John, thanks again for giving us your time today. Over to you, please.
Thanks very much, Julian. And, always great to hear from John and from Julian, and to be reminded about the scale of activity that they're across, even if some of the stats and figures that they were presenting were things I had planned on saying myself. So I wanted to kind of begin by saying that the civic emphasis that we really have in the new strategy is great for our sense of ourselves as important partners for across the region. But it's also a very old story at the university. The university is probably the first civic university. One of the founding fathers of the university, John Owens, one of his stipulations was that staff would not be asked about their religious background when they were employed at the university. And there was a really strong sense that he wanted the university to respond to the city around it and to the changing kind of future imagination of what the city could be. And I'm really delighted to see that the new strategy and the work that we do across our cultural institutions aligns with that, but also aligns with a lot of the other kind of peer institutions that we have worked across the city region with, not just for decades, but for over 100 years, whether that's the Portico Library, whether it's the Manchester Art Gallery, or whether it's many of the other big civic institutions that we're so glad to have in the city region alongside us. I've put this kind of map up on the screen just to remind you of what our CIs are. I kind of wish now, with my teacher hat on, that I had a little quiz that I could ask people to tick off. First of all, do you recognize all of them? And secondly, how many of them have you been to in the last year? So you can see in the beautiful Teletubbies type landscape. I'm probably dating myself there, but you can see Jodrell Bank Centre for Engagement on the left. You can see the new extension of Manchester Museum, that lovely copper roof that we always admire as we go by it, and then underneath the stunning extension to the Whitworth Art Gallery. And over the last 10 or 12 years, there's been almost £70 million of investment in our cultural institutions and in their physical infrastructure, which makes them such a great asset for us as a university. But you can see in the cartoon map next to it there some of the other maybe less obvious assets that we have in terms of our culture. So there's the Martin Harris Centre, which runs concerts and theatre shows which are open to the public as well as to our staff and student body. And then there's Tabley Hall, which is the Cheshire neighbour to Jodrell Bank. So alongside the observatory, Mags and I were out there a couple of weeks ago. There's a kind of a great country house with an exhibition which includes Turner paintings, which Turner painted on site. And again, I think very few people know about this as a University of Manchester cultural asset. And what each of these places has in common is they're part of what we can attach our staff and student activity to. But if you can go to the next slide, please, Mags. They're also an example of how we were able to make our great resources available to our neighbours. Like one of the many amazing things about Manchester Museum under Director Esme Ward has been her co-curation of the South Asia Gallery with a really large network from South Asian communities who drove the development of that space. But kind of following on from that, we have the top floor, which Hannah Hartley is across at the museum, which is a space for local businesses and local educational organizations, including Pink College, to use as a space for them and their students. And it's this kind of activity that we're more and more involved in. The John Rylands on Deansgate is also across the AIU, the Ahmed Iqbal Ullah Library at the Central Library, which again is open to anybody who's a member of the library. Any Greater Manchester resident can go in and can use those resources. And I think that's what's really important, that we see ourselves not just as a resource for our staff and for our students, but that our culture institutions have been able to show the way that we can make our resources available for our neighbourhood communities. And if you can flick to the next slide, please. I just thought that I would pop up here some of the activities that are going on around us even at this moment. So tomorrow night, David Olashoga is going to be talking to Cassie Gupta and to Edmund Smith about the colonial past that we share with so many of these other kind of long-standing institutions in the city, and that's at the John Rylands downtown. Cosmic Titans, a collaboration between quantum theorists and a group of artists, including Conrad Shawcross, opens next Thursday at Jodrell Bank and will be running there across the summer. And we'll be doing an event where scientists and artists will be talking on June 19th out at Jodrell Bank. You can always get involved in the Welly Walks, you and your family, at the Whitworth. I'm not even mentioning the amazing opening they had of Michelle Yearwood Dan's new show there last week. But this is the case about the green spaces around the university are things that we can also lead out on with our staff and with our activities. And of course, we have our own festival, which is again a community oriented festival coming up on the 13th of June. And it's really important that all of this work also chimes with the city and the city region policies. So that's always everywhere, this sense that everyday creativity and community activity must be where we understand our culture to be happening, and we have to use our institutions to make those connections. So I will stop there and thank you for listening, and I will hand over to our GMCA colleague.
Thanks, John McAuliffe. So both Johns have spoken, both internal to the university, of course, and we wanted to balance its partnerships. You'll see in our next strategy, being the university to partner with, being a key partner. John Holden mentioned this in his talk, is absolutely key to us achieving our ambitions. And we've done a huge amount of work with Greater Manchester citizens since prior to the strategy, but definitely since. We've really deepened our relationship with GM citizens, who Sophie will tell you all about them in a moment, are a really important partner of our university. So Sophie, thank you ever so much for giving us your time to come in and give us the perspective from an external partner of the university. So over to Sophie, please. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. And I have a strict 6-minute time limit, so I will attempt to stick to it. Can you all hear me okay? Perfect. I can see some nods. So next slide, please, Mags. So who are we, first of all? So Greater Manchester Citizens are part of a national organisation called Citizens UK. We are not Citizens Advice. We are not a debt advice charity. We argue that we are what we call the UK's kind of biggest, most diverse and most effective people-powered alliance. If anyone has heard of the Living Wage Foundation, they are part of our organisation. So we practice what we call broad-based community organising. So we train leaders. We win campaigns because ultimately we want to come together to be able to win. We don't want to just sit in lovely cozy rooms. We actually want to do something. So we win campaigns and change for our communities. We strengthen the work of our member organisations. So we strengthen the institutions we work alongside. And really crucially and fundamentally, particularly at this point, I think, in time, we work to build trust across different. So we build trust across very, very different communities. At the heart of our work and kind of our method of social change is community organising. So we were founded really on the principle that everyday people have power, and that by bringing those people together across their differences, we can find the common ground that unites us rather than divides us. The people who you see in this picture here are the people who are part of our wonderful alliance. So you can see Mags at the front, she's part of the University of Manchester's incredible core team, but Mags is supported by so many other different organisations in our alliance. So you can see on the bottom right, Keaton is 11 and Keaton is part of Dixon's Newell Green Academy. You can see Hermaine there just by the banner. Hermaine is part of Cheadle Mosque. You can see Jerry in kind of the white pale shirt. He's part of Crouch Shrewsbury. You can see Saj stood next to him. He's part of Kisra Mosque. You can see some of the Kisra Mosque young people we work with. You can see UK and Bolton, who are a mosque in Bolton. I call them the mosque without a building. They don't have a building, but they do incredible work. You can see Karen sat there. Karen's part of Methodist Central Hall, and these are all the members who we work together and we work with to create change across Greater Manchester. And this is one of our what we call our action teams, and this is our Tackling Hate and Discrimination Action Group that have come together to create change on that issue across Greater Manchester. Next slide, please, Mags. So secondly, how are we kind of working in partnership with the University of Manchester? You can see I'm a very visual person, so I like to be able to tell the story through photographs. This is an action that we recently did with the Integrated Care Board in November of last year, which the university's research team around mental health, your colleague Ola, hugely supported us with. So as I said previously, organising is actually about creating change on the issues that really matter to people. And what has come up through our method and through our listening is mental health and mental health provision. There are 5 young people that you can see there at the front. Elena, who is in the middle, is a young carer, and Elena has been on the CAMHS waiting list for 4 years and is yet to have an initial appointment. So we met with the ICB to negotiate on the mental health service and how we can improve it. And that was hugely supported by our work with the University of Manchester, where we are building, I would argue, a research partnership, so that not only do we have the testimonies and the stories in the room, but we have the research from our incredible partner in the University of Manchester to be able to back up what it is we are asking for. We have recently built a University of Manchester working group across the mental health kind of system, and we're looking at how we build that as we prepare for our next big action in June, which I will talk about in a minute. And that is an incredibly fruitful and powerful partnership, I would argue. Next slide, please, Mags. So how are we involving people in GM? Well, I would argue the people of GM form this work. And to me, there's no better picture of our work than this photo here. So here is the action that we did last July, which was what we call our regional youth assembly. So 200 people came together at Manchester Islamic Grammar School for Girls to make asks of some of the most powerful people in Greater Manchester. And it was entirely led by these three at the front. So you've got Nora to the left. Nora is from Kisra Mosque. She's a youth leader there. She's 15 years old. She co-chaired the whole assembly. You've got Keaton in the middle. Keaton is a white working class kid from Wythenshawe. He's 11 years old and he's from Dixon's Newell Green, and he co-chaired that assembly with Nora. And to the right, you have Priya, who is from Dixon's Brooklands, which is in Wythenshawe, and she time kept. And the idea of this assembly was to be able to get in the room with some of the most powerful people in Greater Manchester and negotiate with them on the issues that matter to the people in our communities that we serve. And I believe there's a final slide, isn't there, Mags? Which leads us on very nicely to what we are now working towards in Greater Manchester. So we had that incredible youth assembly. There we had some of the most powerful people in the room. We had the Deputy Mayor, Kate Green, who's also Police and Crime Commissioner. We had the Head of Transport for Greater Manchester. We had the NHS Commissioning Directors. And over the last 6 months, we have been negotiating with them directly through the work of the action teams that you saw on the first slide. The thing that I would love to invite every single person in this room virtually to is our big assembly on the 23rd of June. So we are aiming to bring 500 community leaders from across Greater Manchester together to make asks again of those power holders and to actually negotiate with them in front of a room full of 500 people. We're going to be hosted by the University of Salford, who we are hoping to be able to bring into our alliance as well. It's in their Maxwell building. It's a beautiful space, and we basically need as many people there as possible to be able to support the work that we are doing and to be able to actually win change across our priorities and our issues. So please do sign up, please do register. It is 6 till 7:30. We will finish bang on 7:30. There is no faffing around, and we would absolutely love to see you there. I think that's my time finished, isn't it, Mags? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sophie. And on the spirit of no faffing about, thanks for getting through that in amazing time. All speakers, actually. We wanted to have this part of the session, and we've got another 15 minutes now for Q&A. That was our aim, and we've achieved that. So well done, everyone. Thank you. We can take the slides down. Yeah, thanks, Mags. So just to open it up now, I know, Grace, thank you. You've been posting some links to things in the chat, but it's a relatively small group of people. I think we've got 44 people in here at the moment. So you can put your hand up or just take your mic off and ask a question if nobody else is going to. But while we've got John, and Sophie here, if you've got questions about anything you've heard, or it could be an observation as well, or a suggestion from something you've heard. So please, over to you guys now. So Deanne has got her hand up first. So I'm going to pass over to Deanne for the first question.
Awesome. Thanks, Julian. This one's for John Holden. Hi, John. Great presentation. Thanks so much. What do you think is one of the biggest challenges ahead of us with regards to innovation and one of the biggest opportunities?
Yeah, really good question. I think challenges are, well, sort of, many, but we're facing huge headwinds, as a country and as a sector. We're trying to do something different in the university, so leading into that sort of innovation agenda. It will require us to work in different ways, to be more agile, to be more responsive, and that's going to require change within the institution. So I think there's some sort of not insignificant challenges there. I think the flip side of that, though, is the opportunity, right? Because that the opportunity that we see in terms of the opportunity for impact, for getting more of our ideas out into the world quicker, and for different and new sustainable revenue streams is really significant from the innovation agenda. So I think that us responding to those challenges to unlock those opportunities is really the job for the weeks and months ahead.
Thanks, John, for that great question as well, Deanne. So the next question we got is from Bharti Gupta. Bharti.
Good to see you guys again. So I was wondering that so much good work is going on with partnerships, wonderful partnerships around. And with of course sometimes a social cause, and sometimes that how we can improve not just our like how universities is we are helping into the public as such betterment. So I came across that I come from Stockport area, okay, and they're very beautiful. There's an art studio for well-being, and I don't know if you have heard of it. And also there's a Stockport Women's Center. So because I'm trying to pioneer the University of Manchester umbrella women in technology community with Chloe Gray, our newest director of enterprise and business architecture. So I'm trying to join the dots, like how can we do something in the partnership, in collaboration with can we do it like it has to be general, like a whole Greater Manchester, or it can be specific to areas also, like
Thanks.
Stockport, as we
Thanks,
have.
Bharti, for that
And I'm sure
question. So,
every area will have similar beautiful places. Yeah. Yeah.
What I'll do, Bharti, I think it's a really good question, because the university is based in Manchester, but we are determined to take our work beyond that. It's one of 10 different authorities across Greater Manchester. So rather than the Stockport, maybe John McAuliffe, there may be some things you're aware of culturally in Stockport itself, but John Holden first, perhaps just maybe to that point about breaking out into beyond Greater Manchester, why we're doing that. And Stockport is, after Manchester, it's one of the most popular areas for staff to live. What we see is our own north-south divide in Greater Manchester. So you've got Manchester, Trafford and Stockport, who are the three most affluent parts of Greater Manchester. And you've got this area in the north of the city. And Andy Burnham talks a lot about the north-south divide within Greater Manchester. So John Holden, maybe you could say something about that north-south divide and what we're trying to do. And then John McAuliffe, any observations just further south culturally as well?
Yeah. I mean, really great question. As Julian says, our physical base is the Oxford Road corridor, and it's always going to be the bulk of our activity is here. And we have historically always worked across the whole of Greater Manchester, same with both business and other organisations. But what we're doing through the new strategy is taking a more purposeful approach to that. So looking at how we can really double down our efforts, align those with our partners in the region to sort of have a much greater impact. I talked about one of those examples with the work that we're doing in Rochdale. So we're part of an initiative called the Sustainable Materials Manufacturing Centre. That's partly a sort of innovation centre that's going to do sort of technical work with firms. But it's also a new community asset that's going to drive skills and improvements for a local community, job opportunities, and we're working in partnership with a whole range of other organisations to make that a reality. We're also involved in other sort of place-based initiatives as well. So we're speaking to Oldham Council about their creating a new mayoral development zone around Oldham Town Centre, and they're asking what the university's role is in that. Where in Cumbria, we've got a developing partnership there based on our Dalton Cumbria facility and a robotics and AI lab we've got there as well, and looking to increase that impact. So I think for us, we see the opportunities across the whole of the region and want to get out into the places where people and communities are to work with them. But the thing we need to do is do that in a way that's sustainable, so we're not sort of trying to push at too many fronts at the same time. But the framework of the strategy is very supportive to colleagues who want to go out and make those connections and make that impact themselves.
Thanks.
Yeah, sustaining it. Thank you, John, for this. But the sustaining is really important, and that's where I was thinking about, because I have been associated there because I attended some programs there, and then I volunteer now there sometimes on weekend or for a few hours just to give back. So it's a wonderful experience, and also not just there, but at the women's, like for the whole health and well-being section part of it. Like we have Women's Center as well, and it is also for well-being, the ARC one. So why I'm not promoting it here at all, but I'm just sharing my experience as a staff member, that if we can engage, and I think Laura just said that, yeah, she has she has worked with them, and I have seen some other researchers, they conduct some workshops in that. So I'm aware of that as well. So there's a lot of research collaboration happening. So if we can fit in, like if it is modular and we have plug and play, kind of strategy that you can plug in some more areas or some more centers into your whole framework, that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
it's really powerful. And I mean, the strapline of the strategy is for Manchester for the world, based on that understanding that you can do world-leading, really great research in our communities and take that and publish in top journals and have global impact. So yeah, what you're talking about is very much in line with the plan.
Thanks, John Holden. Yeah, really good examples there. And John McAuliffe, just from a cultural perspective, I guess we have links with lots of cultural organisations across GM, and that would include places like Stockport, of course, as well, wouldn't it? We've got links.
That's right. Again, it's a really great question, Barty, and we really see ourselves as being, to kind of phrase the University of Greater Manchester too. And I was up in Rochdale yesterday we're doing some workshops there with Women's Group in relation to social cohesion and weaving and textiles. But the idea is that we pilot it there. If we're able to look at how that works functionally, it will go to the other boroughs of Manchester subsequently. And so much of our research, as you know, is about pilot and scale, and about what we can do as a university to support that movement to scale from these individual projects. But in Stockport itself, I know we're doing something for the Festival of Libraries at some of the Stockport libraries, as well as at other boroughs all around the city region. And we also work a good deal with Manchester Camerata in terms of their music and health work. And so they also are doing work in each of the 10 boroughs for carers and families of people who are living with dementia. And we also have had a couple of really nice small projects in relation to kind of civic spaces with people from geography and museology and cultural practice, where they have been looking at some of the renewal of the river walks around Stockport as well. So yeah, these are definitely drop me a line about it as well, Barty. I'd be happy to chat with you further, because we're very keen on getting into the boroughs as much as we can.
Thanks, John. And just
Thanks,
a little segue. Kirsty's got her hand up, and I actually wrote to Kirsty about we have an amazing project where our AMBS students, Bachelor of Science students on management, they work in teams to do consultancy, and there's an amazing charity which is born out of Stockport called Dementia Disco, and that's based in Stockport, and they want to franchise that model and scale it across the country. It's happening organically, and some of our business studies students will be supporting those through Kirsty, who coincidentally has got her hand up just now. So it's just a really good example of thinking through the impacts that the university can have through our students, through our research, through our cultural portfolio. There are so many examples, but Kirsty, you've had your hand up patiently, so over to you, please.
Thanks, Julian. Yeah, as part of my role, I co-lead the volunteering and awards team at the university, and as part of my role, as Julian's mentioned, I source projects for the AMBS consultancy project module, and I've been doing this for years, and we've had projects in the past with charities and social enterprises, etc., in Stockport, in Rochdale, housing associations in Rochdale, in Tameside, in Trafford, etc. And also we've got a group of student volunteers actually out today volunteering in Heaton Mersey, which is in the Stockport area. We've got about 15 students out volunteering today in Heaton Mersey. So there is quite we don't just limit our work to Manchester, it's very much Greater Manchester.
Thanks, Kirsty. I was going to take a liberty as chair to just put a question to Sophie now, because one of the things we mentioned earlier was the importance of the university thinking about its role as a big employer. John mentioned 1 in 50 people in Greater Manchester work for the university. It's 6% of all Manchester jobs are at the University of Manchester. So it's only the Hospital Trust, because it has many campuses, is a bigger employer than the university. What we pay our staff, how we treat our staff really matters. And in 2019, with the support of Citizens UK and Greater Manchester Citizens, we worked collaboratively with our students who are members, some of our students were members of GM Citizens, with other organisations to become a living wage employer. And it's one of the most significant things we've done in the past decade, in 2019, to make that decision, which, if you don't know, is to pay people above the legal minimum wage. So it's called a real living wage, this is, because George Osborne kind of associated the term with what effectively became the minimum wage. I'm just wondering, Sophie, from your point of view, from the feedback you get, cost of living is one of your 3 priorities in the next year. Why, from the point of view, being one of the biggest employers, paying a living wage, why is that significant from your perspective in Citizens, Sophie?
Because I think you model that's modeling good practice. And I think the larger institutions should do it kind of out of a moral principle, really. I think that's really, really important. And I think we should be lifting people above the minimum baseline. Like, the minimum wage is minimum for a reason. It's the statutory minimum. But actually, I do think particularly larger organisations have the scope to go so much further with that. So I think that's really, really important. And I think if we kind of lift up the baseline, we lift the baseline up for everybody. And actually, the living wage is one of the things we are going to be looking at that assembly on the 23rd of June. We are hoping that the mayor is going to rock up so we can make those asks directly to him. And kind of going back to a previous point that was made, if I may, one of the things we're going to be looking at is asking for the new regeneration projects that are coming out of the Mayoral Development Corporation in areas like Oldham, in areas like Bolton, in areas like Rochdale, to be living wage areas. And if we succeed in that ask, that uplifts the salary of thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And I think, going back to your original question, Julian, I think it's the moral purpose of the university is to pay its staff fairly. I don't know if that answers your question, but to me, that's the university should be setting that baseline.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. I mean, I think it's interesting. A lot of our academic research would say that the single biggest impact on things like your health outcomes or your education outcomes are the socioeconomic status of your parents. So we can think a lot about pedagogy and supporting people with bursaries to come to our university, but if the parents are paid better, that has a tremendous impact on educational achievement. So just what we pay our staff, because we're such a big employer, doesn't just matter internally, it matters to all these other life outcomes that we have reason to value. So yeah, thanks for that, Sophie. And that work wouldn't have happened as quickly. I think we would have got there eventually, but it wouldn't have happened as quickly without our partnership with GM Citizens, who really supported us because they worked with a lot of other organisations to campaign and to amplify those messages. So I'm going to take one more question, then we do need to finish up. So Emma, you got the privilege of the last question, so over to you.
Thank you very much. I actually wanted to ask sort of 2 small but related questions, if I'm permitted to do so. It's around the sort of social contract and whether the speakers think that that needs to change. We're clearly at the frontier here in Manchester around changing the approach to civic engagement. But I wondered whether the sort of panel felt that it needed to be reframed to have civic engagement really at the heart of it, or whether this is sort of a slow evolution rather than a revolution, if you like. And associated with that is what does the public see as the most meaningful, authentic types of civic engagement that a university can undertake?
Thanks, Emma. I'm going to put the first question to John in a second. The second one, though, we've actually got some survey evidence we've done on exactly that question. We did a big piece of research with the public. We asked 1,000 of them across all the boroughs in Greater Manchester, what do you value most from the university? And disappointingly, for some people in the university, it didn't say it was our research. They said the thing they value the most from the university is the fact that we provide skilled people to go into jobs that matter to people, to train teachers, to train doctors and dentists and business leaders and people who create jobs. And it's a real lesson for us really about what the public see us as a big school, if you like. We educate lots of people who go on to do amazing things. When you drop your kids off at school, you go and see the doctor, etc. We've, as universities, educated all of those. That was the first thing. They also said we're a place of important job opportunities. So as well as being a big school, but education, we're a big employer. And we don't often think of ourselves in those quite basic terms. So that's what the public said to us about the things they most value. Now there's a list of things, but some of the more technical things, and John Holden, even innovation, it's really hard to describe to the public. So we have to think about the language we use, because innovation actually leads to things that improves people's lives. Everybody uses a smartphone today. Everybody's traveled and they've used a particular type of energy system to travel, or they may have taken a tablet this morning, or they'll take one later today. And innovation is intrinsic to all of that. So it's trying to put the more perhaps esoteric work of the university into language that people have reason to value, what they pay out of their important hard-earned taxes that they pay, and trying to get that question. And that answers the bit about license to operate. But I'm just going to add in John McCall, if John Holden, any final reflections on that, and then we're going to wrap up. Great question.
It's a really great question, Emma. Thank you. And Julian has really talked about that public first work, which I think there was a certain, to those of us who work, very proudly at the University of Manchester, it was kind of, people didn't really know what we did, and weren't really aware that the university was so connected to the city around them and around us. So I think it's the storytelling around what university education is for has changed in the last 20 years. I think the fee structure and the idea that it's based around the individual student who is the only profiter from the education that they receive has been really inimical to the really great story of what universities actually can do at their best, which is that education benefits the whole of society. And it is that telling that story about how the work that we do has that larger civic benefit is going to be so important to the storytelling. And Julian, Deanne, Mags and team are really at the forefront, as you say, of getting that not just across as a story of the university, but beginning to reintegrate it into our student experience and telling the story of our research too. I'll hand over to John.
Yeah, I mean, just agree with Julian and John. I don't want to end but being on a note of doom and gloom, but the university's model is under pressure as never before, and our funding, the bulk of our funding comes from the UK taxpayer. And we know that but the support for universities is softening. So we need to be really clear about our impact and the benefits that we have. So I think to your question, is it incremental or is it urgent? It's urgent. And I think the good news for this university is I think the work we're already doing on civic and innovation and culture and beyond makes us really well positioned to be able to make the case to the public that in continued investment into this institution is a good thing to do. But there's a lot of work still to be done. But I think the plan we've set out sort of puts us on the track to be able to do that.
Great question, though, Emma. Thank you very much. So 3 quick things then by way of conclusion. First of all, in the chat, there's some amazing links have been shared there if you've not been keeping up, and you can look at the chat afterwards as well if you don't have time straight away. So things you can sign up to, newsletters, find out further information. That's the first thing. Secondly, we put on a range of these sessions for staff where we try to give case studies of work and ensure that we can engage with staff and people can ask questions. And Grace and my team, I think now, is going to put up a quick survey just to give us a little bit of feedback about, we're really interested, did you learn something new? Might you do something different, even if it's to sign up to a newsletter, for example, or you want to get in touch with one of the speakers you've heard today? So if you could quickly answer that survey that's popped up on the screen, that's the second thing. And the third, last but by no means least thing to do, is to say a massive thank you to John and to Sophie, but also to Mags in my team and to Grace and to Deanne for helping put on this session as well. We've had really good attendance, some excellent questions. Actually, it's a real reminder of how important this area of work is, civic engagement, and why it matters to the university. So please do feel free to get in touch. We want this to be the start of a conversation with you, and you'll see lots of opportunities to continue to engage, whether that's coming to events, whether that's signing up to some of our newsletters where you can find out about things and come into future sessions that we organise on these. So thanks ever so much for giving up your valuable time today. Thanks to the speakers, but thanks most of all to all of you that have given up a lunchtime today and you forfeited an opportunity to sit in the sun. I'm going to go out and do that now for 10 minutes before my next meeting. Thank you ever so much, everyone. I hope to see you on campus soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.